in high school, I guess, and early university years, but mostly high school, I was quite religious about going to church. My family is a Catholic, and as a kid you go because your parents make you go and go to Sunday school and all that good jazz. But once I got older, I mean, obviously I didn't really need to go. I mean, my parents would give me grief, but I wanted to go in high school. And I think in my teenage years, like any other teenager, there's a lot of things you're processing, right? And it was helpful, right? It was a tumultuous time, teenage being a teenage boy. But um, yeah, religion was very comforting. It was nice. Not every aspect of it, but it was good. And for me, a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I knew went to church to meet people, to hang out with their friends and family and other folks that they knew. For me, it was definitely a more solo thing. I wasn't that social, and I don't know. It wasn't a big part of it. I was like whatever, right? And I really went for the mass. I went for the ceremony, I suppose, and I really believe that that was my spiritual um, practice. That was my contemplative practice. So yeah, I think that's definitely something maybe I'll write about or talk about more. Um, he says add pictures perhaps so that you can dive into all the elements and dynamics that contributed to producing the contemplative experience, being sure to describe that experience and its associated feelings in depth. This could be fabulous work. What contributed to you calming down and focusing? And again, I mean, I'm not pushing any religion here. I'm not pushing any spirituality or any kind of practice, really. You do what you want, right? I think religious freedom and all that is extremely important, especially in our world and the way it is right now. Um, I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but there is a Amazon ad that I just saw yesterday, actually, while I was watching TV with my wife, and there's this. I think it's a Catholic priest because he's got the Roman collar, and some kind of I think like a oh. I'm going to show my ignorance here, but the I think it was like Islamic um, or like a Muslim, some type of a Middle Eastern religious leader, and the two of them, the two old men, are talking on a couch. Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't really know what the term is, and so they're chatting and they're very friendly and they're laughing, and then they realize that both of them, they're old men and they do a lot of praying and a lot of kneeling, and their knees aren't so good. So they send each other these padded knee pads over Amazon, and both of them get the same thing, and it's like a really nice warming kind of sentiment and a really good ad. I really liked it, and makes you wonder, like, why can't we be more like that? So I think in terms of religion, I figure whatever your practice is, as long as you're not spreading hatred and as long as you're not um, doing any harm to others, do what works for you, right? Um, when I was a teenage boy, going to my Catholic church was what worked for me. I kind of grew out of it, or was a bit distanced from it, and right now I don't know where I stand on my faith, but that's an interesting point too, because okay, so I want to talk about that actually before we keep going, and this is why this video is getting longer and longer and longer. But when I went to university and when I was an undergrad in my late teens and early 20s, my faith was shaken. I mean, even in high school, when you go to church and you hear the sermons, you read the Bible, and you go, really? Like, that happened? Or like, what is the point of this story? Or there's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of questions, and that's where faith comes in to a large extent, I think. But high school, I was still kind of going along with it, and I was all right. When I got to university, and maybe this is a credit to the education I received, but the idea of critical thinking, think for yourself, look for proof. And I think I talked about it in the earlier video, but that separation of your head, the talking head, the cognitive mind, the empirical proof versus the heart or the spirit or the rest of it. It was so striking, and it changed me in a fundamental way, I guess. And in some ways, I suppose that was their intention, and that worked. And it became really hard for me to sit there and go to church, because my mind was again in turmoil. I was listening to the sermons. I was listening to the Bible verses, going, that doesn't make sense to me. And my young brain was trying to balance that, I think, between faith and taking things and interpreting things in a religious way versus asking, where's the proof? How did this guy die and come back to life? Or turn water into wine, or whatever, all the things that's in there. And it was really hard for me to balance. So that kind of started me distancing myself from the church and not going as often and whatnot. And I suppose the clarity and the peace that I found in the church was disrupted. My wife and I got married in a church, and we went to marriage prep classes and all this kind of stuff. For Catholic churches, if you want to get married in a Catholic church, you have to be baptized, or one of you have to be. Also, you have to go to marriage prep class, which I think a big chunk of it was very helpful. The other chunk, I was like, well, I don't know, right? I mean, you make up your own decisions or your own opinions of it. But that was a conflicting thing for me as well, because I'm baptized, but I'm not really a practicing Catholic, and getting married in a Catholic church and going through the religious ceremony. Again, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I felt conflicted, but it happened, and I chose, and we chose to do it that way. As we talk about our firstborn, and as my son is coming into this world, we talk about whether we're going to baptize our kid, and my parents ask about that and all that stuff as well, and we don't know. And if I had to give you an answer today, I'd probably say I'm kind of inclined to say that he should make up his mind when he grows up and he's old enough to decide. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's quite loaded. So. So the point that I was trying to get at, sorry, so I'm coming back. It's a long detour, but I'm coming back. The reintroduction, if you will, of cognitive curriculum development, and how contemplative inquiry, the mindfulness, and all of this would help with education. Embedded in it, very much a part of it, is spirituality. And whether that's religion for you, or that's just straight up spiritual thoughts and ideas, that's been interesting for me, and it's been bringing back a lot of past thoughts as well as where I am right now. So that's been an interesting thing, and that's an ongoing thing for me. So I'm still exploring that, but I can tell you that it's been good. It's been a positive experience to re-engage with my spirituality, and without the baggage. I find that, at least my experience with Catholicism, because that's really all I got to go on, and not to say that I'm an expert in it, but I find that sometimes with religion, there's guilt, right? There's guilt, and there's punishment, and there's a catch. There's rules. There's boundaries and things like that, which I find to be very distracting, I guess, and it takes away from it to a degree, or at least it does for me. So again, it's been good to re-engage, and a part of me got a chance, as I mentioned before, with Vicky's class to really re-engage with shamanism. My family is from South Korea, and part of Korean culture, the more ancient culture, traditional culture, has some shamanism elements to it, or quite a bit of it. I'm not an expert, but it seems to be a theme, and I wonder if that was why. Maybe that's a part of me. Maybe was a part of my upbringing with my interaction with some of my older relatives, like my grandparents. But it's been comforting, and it's almost been like a coming home of sorts for me, which was really nice in Vicky's class. So again, something that I've been experiencing and playing around with. Charles goes on to say that, I love that you said it came in a bit of a dialogue with God. So this is about me going to church, or perhaps myself, and that you enjoyed that. You are on your way to perhaps developing a dialogical model of contemplation. As you may know, I write a paper about that very thing in our first book on contemplation, and our second book is all about the intersubjective aspects of contemplation. So yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of talked about that already, but yeah, that dialogue, I think, for me really works. At 12:08, Charles says, it's a focus on something. That's what I wrote. And he says, yes, I think the key is what kind of focusing? What are the elements? The dynamics of that focusing? What is involved and what is going on? Not so much cognitive involvement is what I wrote. And he says, are you referring to thinking here or what? I think I'm talking about thinking here. So that's what I meant by cognitive involvement. What is it in the cognitive process that is not so involved? I think this is important to tease out. So I think I kind of answered this already, but the different levels, right? So of contemplation, so at the more shallower levels, there's a lot more cognitive involvement, a lot of thinking, whereas on the, for me anyways, the bottom part or the deeper part is a lot more awareness, a lot more observation, and not so much of an active, the brain isn't quite turned on as much where I'm trying to think or tease out some kind of a solution or something, or work something out. And then he says, a cognitive process that takes the focus away. Again, good point. Again, zero in on what is happening, what is involved or isn't involved, and you're onto some great stuff here. So thank you for the compliment in terms of what is happening. I don't know. I guess all I can do right now is just kind of describing it and how it makes me feel. A part of me almost thinks that I did my degree in psychology, and I remember, I don't even remember the definition, but I remember there was that idea that your brain processes the information that you gain throughout the day through sleep and through some subconscious processes. We don't really know exactly what happens, but for example, going from short-term memory to long-term memory, and there's all this process that happens behind the scenes without you actually thinking about it. So if you prime your brain with some ideas, so let's say you're preparing for an exam or you're learning a new concept, so you prime your brain by introducing those concepts and ideas to your brain, and you work on it for a while, and you focus on it, and you concentrate on it for a while, and then you let it go, and then you move on to other activities. Maybe you're running errands or you're doing whatever. And then when you re-engage with that again, sometimes your brain has made some progress without you consciously thinking about it. And I suppose that's the closest I can come. When I'm contemplating and meditating, there are moments where it kind of feels like that, where I come to a realization, but I didn't consciously work on it. It almost feels like it was given to me. Maybe that's also what happens with religion sometimes, right? That faith and the spiritual, and whether psychologists are right or whether various different religious leaders are right, but if you have questions and ideas and things you're trying to work out, and then after a while, whether through contemplative practices or whether through sleep and science and other things, you're able to come to a solution or come to a deeper understanding. it might seem like someone has given it to you or gifted to you. It's kind of what it feels like sometimes. So again, interesting thing that I'm kind of working through. 1231, contemplation like giving a space. Interesting. I like this notion of perhaps clear or more expansive space. A space for what? For focusing, for being, for awareness. Allows you to delve deeper. Yes. So for me, I find that when I'm stressed out or when I'm getting really tired, I need space. It's like elbow room, right? You got to move your arms out to just kind of create space for yourself. Because if everything's all, squished in, you can't really move. And if you're stuck somewhere, then you can't really make much of a change or do anything. So for me, contemplation, meditation gives me a little bit of space, right, to kind of push out. And then with that space, I can fill it with other things that can help me dig myself out from a tough situation. So that's what I was talking about here. And it is the space he was asking, was it for focusing, was it for being, was it for awareness? Yes to all of it. Yes to all of it. It gives me peace. It gives me a chance to be just myself, or to be compassionate to myself, or it also gives me a chance to regroup and regain a bit of determination to build up my resilience to re-engage with difficult tasks and things like that. So yeah, I think it's all of it. 1308, he says, so creating a room is important. So what do we do to create that room? Can creating a room in space and time, a certain physical space and time to practice, help create the mental room we need? Yeah, and again, it's the idea of space that I just talked about. So I think that's kind of related to that. So creating space and room is really important, I think, because if you don't have room, you can only make very small movements, and if you're only making very small movements, I think it's harder to dig ourselves out of tough situations. 1344, he says, creating those temporary pockets in your daily life. Fabulous. Keep doing this. My wife and I religiously, pun intended, create a space every morning and night for meditation. We've had a time